you're probably not going to like to hear this. I'm reading again from Axios News. Criminals may have stolen as much as half of the unemployment benefits the United States has been pumping out over the past year, some experts say. Unemployment fraud during the pandemic could easily reach $400 billion, according to some estimates, and the bulk of the money likely ended in the hands of foreign crime syndicates, making this not just theft, but a matter of national security. When the pandemic hit, states weren't prepared for the unprecedented wave of unemployment claims. They all knew fraud was inevitable, but decided getting the money out to people who desperately needed it was more important than laboriously making sure all of them were genuine. Blake Hall, the CEO of ID.me, a service that tries to prevent this kind of fraud, tells Axios that America has lost more than $400 billion to fraudulent claims. As much as 50% of all unemployment money may have been stolen. Haywood Talcove, the CEO of LexisNexis Risk Solutions, estimates that at least 70% of the money stolen by imposters ultimately left the country, much of it ending up in the hands of crime syndicates in China, Nigeria, Russia, and elsewhere. These groups are definitely backed by the state, Talcove tells Axios. Much of the rest of the money was stolen by street gangs domestically, who have made up a greater share of the fraudsters in recent months. The Treasury Service is declining to comment. Mules, who are low-level criminals, are given debit cards and asked to withdraw money from ATMs. That money then gets transferred abroad, often via Bitcoin. Before the pandemic, unemployment claims were relatively rare and generally lasted for such short amounts of time that international criminal syndicates didn't view them as lucrative targets. After unemployment insurance became the primary vehicle by which the U.S. government tried to keep the economy afloat, however, all that changed. Unemployment became where the big money was. It was also being run by bureaucrats who weren't as quick to crack down on criminals as private companies normally do. Not only that, it's estimated that a large proportion of PPP loans, over 20%, went to fraudulent businesses. But wait, there's more. Also from Axios, 25 states, all run by Republican governors, are eliminating some or all of the UI benefits. Some are even offering back-to-work bonuses to further encourage a return to work. Expect the results to become midterm campaign fodder. While these federal programs provided important temporary relief, vaccines and jobs are now in good supply, says Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, a Republican and potential 2024 candidate for president. No, he's not. While these federal programs provided important temporary relief, I read that part. As of now, most Democratic lawmakers argue there are more factors contributing to the staff shortages, child care, and other, according to several members of Congress. Yet many Democrats are increasingly willing to admit they may have gotten it wrong and fear the spike in activity this summer will generate a backlash among their constituents. It's hard to go out to eat now without having to wait. More and more companies are having to deploy kiosks and other things. So we have a yard service for our yard. I got an email the other day from our yard service. They are willing to install at no cost to me a solar-powered automated lawnmower to cover my yard to cut the grass. Why? There aren't enough people. So they need people to switch to the solar-powered lawnmowers that will trim the yard, and they can have maintenance workers come do all the other stuff, trimming the bushes and trimming the hedges and pruning the trees and pulling the weeds, because they're short-staffed and they're not alone. It's a growing problem. People are moving to automation. And now the problem is once they moved out of automation, they're not going to go back. People are permanently putting themselves on the sidelines because they don't want to go back to work. They're getting the unemployment benefit. There's no reason for them to go to work as a result of getting the unemployment benefit. So employers are having to come up with something. Many of them can go to automation. If you're in the fast food industry, you can do automation in kiosks inside the restaurant, reduce the staff who are taking orders, focus on preparing the food. If you're a lawn maintenance company, you can deploy robotic solar-powered lawnmowers, I suppose. I mean, this is the thing. So they won't charge me any more than what I'm already paid. They won't actually increase the price. And they'll cover all the maintenance stuff. Now, my yard, I don't know that it would work with my yard, frankly. I don't know that I want to do that. But a lot of people will. And they need to, because otherwise our yards aren't going to get mowed. I was talking to a local politician in an area of Georgia the other day who told me that they are paying double now for trash collection. They are paying double what they were paying for people to drive the trash and recycling trucks in their area of Georgia. And they're about to have to raise taxes as a result. And they still can't get enough people to run them. They are perpetually behind on trash and recycling because so many people are out of work and don't want to come back to work. The government is paying people to not come back to work. The government is paying people to sit on the sidelines. It's very notable that the White House, which was first very critical of people like Brian Kemp in Georgia and Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis and others who had decided they were not going to keep paying the unemployment benefit, the extra supplemental unemployment benefit, they weren't going to keep paying it. The White House first came out and criticized them, and now the White House is coming out and saying, yeah, if they want to do it, they can do it. I can't deny that it appears to be having significant impact, particularly on the hospitality industry. Angus King, an independent who affiliates with the Democrats, said, he's a Maine senator, the enhanced unemployment benefit is helping to support the economy. On the other hand, is it impeding job growth? I don't know. We'll find out. He added that as a former governor of Maine, he believes states should have wide discretion to make their decisions. Tim Kaine, senator from Virginia, former governor of Virginia, says, we're trying to basically solve a once-in-a-century health pandemic that completely ravaged the economy. I think we did a good job at it. Was everything calibrated perfectly? I don't know that I'm going to say that. I'm not questioning decisions that governors are making about it. I think if there's solid evidence that there's a disincentive, the governors may curve it back. They were disputing this weeks ago, and now they can't dispute it anymore. And the reason they can't dispute it is because they've gone home. They went on congressional recess. They've gone back to their states. The help wanted signs are everywhere. The short staff signs are everywhere. You go to a lot of restaurants now and there's a preemptive apology posted out front saying, we're sorry, we're moving slow because we're short staffed. It's happening across the country. Interestingly enough, the right to work states are outperforming the union states in both getting people back to work and getting the economies back online. The Republican states are doing better than the Democratic states in handling the post-pandemic recovery because they're more likely to make the difficult choice of saying we can't keep extending the unemployment benefit. As a result, people are going back to work in those states. They're not going back to work in the Democratic states. There is a real divide growing in this country. And if you want a job, you better hope you live in a red state because you're more likely to find one than in a Democratic state, because the Republicans have decided to start incentivizing people going back to work. And that's not a partisan point. That's the truth. Truth matters. And the Democrats right now were first attacking Republicans on this, and now they're like, wow, you know what? They may be onto something. We better catch on. Why? Because they don't want their constituents blaming them and internalizing that Congress made unemployment worse by extending an unemployment benefit.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 877.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. Well, they're coming for apple pie. Now, listen, we don't need to get into this debate. Y'all know I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of fruit. My whole family loves fruit, particularly strawberries. You know, Sherry's Berries, they're not an advertiser, but I get Sherry's Berries for the family all the time, and I've advertised for them, and my gosh, do I despise strawberries. But everyone in my family loves them, and they really do have the best. They're not an advertiser, so I'm not being paid to say this, but they're awesome. But gosh, dude, just the smell. And peaches, I know those of you in Georgia, I'm sorry, peaches, no. I will eat an apple, but I hate apple pie. Well, I shouldn't say I hate apple pie. It's just a texture thing. I just don't like the texture. Bye-bye, America's pie. This is from the New York Post. A UK newspaper is being accused of trying to cancel apple pie by linking it to slavery and the ongoing genocide of indigenous people. In a lengthy examination in The Guardian, author and scholar Raj Patel lists the ways that people are wrong in assuming that nothing could be more American, with even the recipe a ripoff of a British pumpkin pie recipe. He then lists at length the sometimes bloody origins of almost every part of the beloved dish, from apple sugar and even the gingham cloth it's traditionally served with. I don't know anybody who serves it with a gingham cloth. In the drama of nationalist culture, the bloody and international origins of the American pie are subject to collective amnesia. The American pie... The apple pie is as American as stolen land, wealth, and labor. We live its consequences today, says the author, who is also a research professor at the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas. Well, at least he didn't criticize brisket. They'd run him out of Texas for that. The article, Food Injustice Has Deep Roots, Let's Start with America's Apple Pie, details how apples came to the West in the 1500s with colonists and their vast and ongoing genocide of indigenous people, English colonizers that used apple trees as markers of civilization, which is to say property. John Chapman, better known as Johnny Appleseed, took these markers of colonialized property to the frontiers of U.S. expansion, where his trees stood as symbols that indigenous communities had been extirpated. He linked sugar to the slave trade, gingham to war capitalism that enslaved and committed acts of genocide against millions of indigenous people in North America and millions of Africans and their descendants through the Atlantic slave trade. Oh, my goodness gracious. Apple pie is racist now. Apple pie is racist. You know what? Some people just want to be offended. That's really what we're dealing with here, is that there are crazy people on planet Earth. And they can go on social media and find validation because they can connect rather easily with other crazy people. And other crazy people affirm them and tell them that they're not crazy because the crazy people don't know that they're crazy. And so then they voice opinions, and what happens is their opinions are unique and insane, and the media is like, hey, let's give these people a platform because we will get clicks from their bat poop crazy ideas. And people click through, and their traffic goes up, and their revenue goes up because they're publishing crazy ideas like apple pie is racist. You can't wave the American flag, a mom, apple pie, and the flag. You can't wave the American flag anymore. You can't eat apple pie anymore. And there are no more mothers. There are birthing people. In fact, when we come back, one of the Congressman Kevin Smith, I think his name is, Congressman Smith, was in a hearing, and the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget used the term birthing person. The budget itself uses the term birthing person. And Smith had to ask the Office of Management and Budget what birthing person means. We're getting rid of mom, apple pie, and the American flag. Well, I shouldn't say we, because we're not, are we? It's the left. The American left is doing this. Y'all, again, Donald Trump is closer to the mainstream of American society than the American political left is these days. When you got people out there saying stuff like this, that apple pie is racist, that moms are birthing people. That's normal people don't do this. This is
30.
the crazy part here. Normal people don't do these things. Normal people don't believe these things. Do you really think that normal people are going to want to vote for someone who thinks that a mother is a birthing person? No, they're not. Which is why the Democrats are in such despair already over 2022. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I gotta talk about a sensitive subject. This is from CBS News. The majority of online recruitment in active sex trafficking cases in the United States last year took place on Facebook, according to the Human Trafficking Institute's 2020 Federal Human Trafficking Report. The internet has become the dominant tool that traffickers use to recruit victims, and they often recruit them on a number of very common social networking websites. Human Trafficking Institute CEO Victor Boutros said on CBS News Wednesday, Facebook overwhelmingly is used by traffickers to recruit victims in active sex trafficking cases. He said, active cases include those in which defendants were charged in 2020, as well as those in which defendants were charged in previous years and charges were still pending in trial last year or the case was on appeal. Data from the last 2 decades included in the Human Trafficking Report showed that 30% of all victims identified in federal sex trafficking cases since 2000 were recruited online. In 2020, in the United States, 59% of online recruitment of identified victims in active cases took place on Facebook alone. The report also states that 65% of identified child sex trafficking victims recruited on social media were recruited through Facebook. The tech giant responded to the report's findings in a statement to CBS, quote, sex trafficking and child exploitation are abhorrent and we don't allow them on Facebook. We have policies and technologies to prevent these types of abuse and take down any content that violates our rules. We also work with safety groups, anti-trafficking organizations, and other technology companies to address this, and we report all apparent instances of child sexual exploitation to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the statement said. Instagram and Snapchat were the most frequently cited platforms after Facebook. The annual report uses data from every active federal criminal and civil human trafficking case over the last year, but 2020's featured an expanded scope. The report also looked at the last 20 years of trends. The report revealed that children accounted for 53% of identified victims in active criminal human trafficking cases in 2020, and women made up a large majority. 44% of victims of sex trafficking were women, half were girls. Now, there are a number of things to say here, one of which is the report is obviously being seized on by people that say Facebook bad. I need to go on a tangent here just for a moment so you understand part of what's going on here. Part of the problem with Facebook right now is having banned the President Trump. The conservatives view Facebook as bad. And with Facebook being viewed as bad, anything that can be seized on to reiterate that Facebook is bad is being used. Part of this is Apple as well. Facebook has been pushing stories, amplifying stories about Apple that are critical of Apple because Apple Computer changed its policies online. If you've got an iPhone now, you will notice you're getting, if you've updated to the latest operating system, you'll notice you're getting little windows pop up and say, hey, do you want this app to track you? And it is devastating the business for Google, Facebook, and Twitter and other websites. Websites can no longer track you using Apple's technology. They are trying now to come up with other ways to be able to track you because Apple is blocking them from access to data they've long relied on in order to track you. So, for example, every device uses a unique identifier. It is a series of numbers and letters that identifies every single device connected to the internet. Your laptop, your iPad, your tablet, your cell phone, you name it. If it generates a data signal, it generates an ID, and that ID is discoverable until Apple released its software update, and now it's not discoverable anymore. It's anonymized, meaning that the companies can't get it, so they can't build a complete profile of who you are. As a result of this, Facebook is pushing back on Apple. One, claiming Apple's going to be destroying small businesses. 2, amplifying stories about some Apple devices and technologies that may be exploited for bad things. Like, for example, Apple has this new thing called an AirTag. It's a little bitty disc. It looks like a Mentos. And this disc, you can put it in something and it'll detect any passing iPhone to figure out where it is. And then if it's yours and it's registered on your phone, you can say, hey, where is my backpack? Where is my cell phone? Where are my keys? Where is my car? And this thing, this tag, will keep a geolocation. And so these stories will come out and say, stalkers could use this. They could drop one in your pocket or your purse and you would never know, and the stalker could use it. And of course, on Facebook, these stories have just been super amplified. Oh, of course, they make Apple look bad. The Apple has put in technology, by the way. So, for example, if someone drops one of these AirTags in your purse, you get a notice on your phone saying, hey, an unidentified AirTag is near you. And it makes a little beep. Now, I highlight that so you need to understand there is a little more going on here with amplifying Facebook is bad. Conservatives are out to get them right now. The left is out to get Facebook because they believe conservatives do too well on Facebook. There's a New York Times technology reporter who every day highlights what stories are trending the most on Facebook, and it is inevitably and at all times conservative. Rarely does a progressive story trend as highly on Facebook as a conservative story. Ben Shapiro absolutely crushes Facebook. The Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's website, crushes the Facebook algorithm. I admire his ability to do it, and the left can't stand it, and so they're mad at Facebook. They blame Facebook for the election of Donald Trump. So you got the right mad at Facebook, you've got the left mad at Facebook, you've got Apple mad at Facebook, you've got Facebook mad at Apple, you've got this tech war, and everyone wants to amplify any criticism of Facebook right now. On top of that, you do have a legitimate issue here that so many people, more than 1 billion people, have Facebook accounts worldwide. And WhatsApp, which is part of Facebook, is an anonymous messaging service. Well, you know who you are, but Facebook can't get the data. The police can't get the data. The result is that if you're a human trafficker, you want to use something like WhatsApp. You want to get on Facebook. You want to do make passive statements that lure people in. But Facebook is just the vehicle because so many people are on Facebook. There are so many accounts on Facebook. There used to be a website called Backpage. So Craigslist used to have a personals section. If you know what Craigslist is, it's essentially it is the website that wiped out the modern American newspaper. People like to blame other things for the destruction of the modern American newspaper, but really Craigslist is to blame. Modern American newspapers funded themselves not just through advertising, but through classified ads. Craigslist is a free of charge website that allows you to place classified ads on Craigslist. And Craigslist had a personal section where you could go if you wanted to hook up with someone that night, you wanted just a sexual relationship for a night, or you wanted a girlfriend, or you just wanted to meet new people, you could go on there and you could put an ad and connect. And people were using it for human trafficking as well. People were using it to sell drugs. People were using it for human trafficking. Well, a website sprung up called Backpage that took the personal section of Craigslist and made it, that's the entire thing. The entire website, Backpage, was the personal section of Craigslist, and people would start going to Backpage if they wanted to sell drugs or engage in human trafficking. It really became the place to go, particularly for human trafficking. Ultimately, Congress passed a law that made it very, very difficult for these websites to be able to operate, in large part because of the abuse over Backpage. Well, the human traffickers were already online, and it was a really easy way for people who were engaged in human trafficking to connect, and so they didn't go away. Some of them moved to private services that are hard to trace and hard to track, but a lot of them, they got on Facebook because there are over 1 billion people on Facebook. And one of the things that they have done is they've gotten very good at curating and creating advertisements that don't trip Facebook's filters. I know of one. I've told this story before. Some of you have heard me say this. a Delta Air, well, a human trafficking rescuer told me the story. It involves Delta Airlines. Two girls in Denver, Colorado, won a modeling competition. They saw the ad on Facebook. They applied and they won. And they were given an all-expense paid trip to New York City via Delta Airlines. And the girls each told their parents that they were spending the night at someone else's house and had a boyfriend drop them off at the airport. And they showed up to check in for their flight. And it was the Delta Airlines employee who had been trained in human trafficking, who realized something wasn't right. Here are two teenage girls headed to New York City, and their tickets are one way. The girls had no idea their tickets were one way. And the Delta employee, who deserves a medal, started just asking the girls where they were going. Said they had won a modeling competition. Well, what was the modeling competition? Well, it was on Facebook. Well, where are you going to New York? They were saying, I think it was the Hotel Pennsylvania, one of the big hotels near Madison Square Gardens. And she says, how are you getting home? And the girls got a little befuddled. And she says, you've got a one-way ticket. So the Delta employee was able to get in touch with law enforcement, who was able to get in touch with law enforcement in New York City. But by the time it all happened, the flight would have landed in New York. And the girls weren't there. And whoever inhabited the room had packed up and disappeared, had left. But it was an ad on Facebook for a modeling competition. It wasn't, hey, do you want to be trafficked? Do you want to be kidnapped and sexually assaulted? No, it wasn't any of that. It was a modeling competition. Submit your photos, and if you're good enough, we'll send you on an all-expense-paid trip to New York City. There isn't a very good way for Facebook algorithms to get around that unless they ban all modeling competitions and things like that, which maybe they do by now. But it's a really big deal, and don't blame Facebook for this. Yes, it happens on Facebook, and they're working it out. They're trying to do it. But the real thing is these guys are online, and they're going to go online. If not on Facebook, they'll go on Twitter. If not on Twitter, they'll go on some other social media engine. They will go on some website. They will make it look legit. They every time have to try harder and harder and harder. It's a real problem. Facebook can certainly do and should do better. But it's a problem. But you know the other problem? One of the weirdest things that is happening in society today is that if I am for something, people who don't like me become immediately predisposed to oppose whatever I like. Have y'all noticed this? If you're a Republican and you believe waving the flag is good, suddenly the Democrats believe that waving the flag is racist. If you're a Democrat and you suddenly believe that Chipotle is the best burrito, if you're a Republican, you're like, I'm sticking with Moe's. It is this weird thing where everyone defines themselves in opposition to someone else. And so one of the big issues out there right now is that a lot of churches have focused on prostitution and human trafficking. And as churches, particularly Christian committed evangelical churches, are focusing on human trafficking, a lot of secular people out there are like, yeah, it's a myth. It's not really a big deal. It's a moral outrage. It's not really true. There aren't that many people who are trafficked. A lot of it's consensual and they're exaggerating. It's the weirdest damn thing to see. Human trafficking is a real phenomenon. And you've got progressive activists out there. It's overstated. This is just something churches are trying to do to make themselves look relevant. I don't know. It's like prostitution. You've got part of the feminist movement now defends prostitution. That's empowering women to use their body. Until you really explore it and you talk to the women who are engaged in prostitution, and really there's a whole lot of psychological craziness going on there. But just because conservative Christians think human trafficking is bad, you got this new wave of progressive out there saying, well, if they think it's bad, it must really not be a thing, or it must be good. It's just the craziest world we live in these days with all of this. The reality is this. Human trafficking is terrible, and it's on the rise, and they're using the internet, and you must be vigilant with your kids and your community to watch out for this stuff, you would be stunned. And overwhelmingly, it's relatives trafficking kids, which makes it even harder to root out. But it still must be rooted out.
Politics, news,
A nun who ran a Catholic elementary school in Torrance, California, has agreed to plead guilty to stealing more than $835,000 in school funds to pay for her personal expenses, including a gambling habit. Mary Margaret Kruper, 79 years old, was charged Tuesday with one count of wire fraud and one count of money laundering, according to the U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California. A plea agreement was filed with the charging document. A statement from Kruper's attorney, Mark Byrne, said that Kruper is very remorseful for what happened, describing how she became a nun at 18 and has dedicated her life to helping others. Unfortunately, later in her life, she's been suffering from a mental illness that clouded her judgment and caused her to do something she otherwise would not have done. She's 80 years old. A person who answered the phone at St. James Catholic School, where Kruper was principal for nearly 3 decades until she retired in 2018, said the school had no comment. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles said it had contacted authorities in 2018 when financial reviews showed that a substantial amount of school funds had been misappropriated for personal use by Kruper. So when she was, 76, 77 years old? My goodness gracious. Kruper had retired by 2018, along with Sister Lana Chang, a former teacher who had misused the money. Parents were notified, and my goodness, apparently they were both like gamblers. They were addicted to gambling. The poor nun, 80 years old, and has a gambling addiction. Goodness gracious. Oh my goodness. I just, stories like this, they're heartbreaking, and at the same time that they're also, I kind of find them funny. If I'm honest. The gambling, I bet she's also a chain smoker. I bet you. You know it. You know it. I've got friends. I never went to Catholic school. Never went to Catholic school. Got friends who went to Catholic school, and my goodness, the stories about the nuns are just legion. And now we got a gambling one who misappropriated school funds. But, it happens to people, not just nuns. It does. We all fall short. We do. When we come back, y'all, did you know if you're white, you're racist, and there's no cure for it? The Journal of American Psychoanalytic Association has published a study likening whiteness to a malignant parasitic condition for which there is not yet a permanent cure. This comes as even the New York Times is reporting now on the woman who spoke at Yale and gave the lecture, who's the psychiatrist who hates white people. This whole idea of whiteness being bad is going to come back and haunt the left as it permanently exiles their ability to win. And they don't even understand what's going on with them. and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the third hour of this here program. The Supreme Court has released an interesting ruling, Borden versus the United States. It's about the Armed Career Criminal Act. The court says that a felony that involves recklessness doesn't satisfy the law's use of physical force element, and thus does not trigger the law's violent felony mandatory minimum sentence. Essentially, if you have a armed career criminal, someone who is regularly engaged in crimes with guns, they can be found to be guilty of a violent felony, even if it isn't, and have a mandatory minimum sentence. But if you are engaged in recklessness, which this person, Borden, was engaged in recklessness. Not actually, he wasn't committing a crime. He was just being reckless, but he had a gun, and so he was charged, and they're like, this doesn't apply. But this is the interesting part. Forget the nuances of the case. It is Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan with Gorsuch and with Clarence Thomas. Alito, Kavanaugh, John Roberts, and Amy Coney Barrett are in the minority. It's a 4-1-4 case, though, because what's so weird here is that Kagan, Sotomayor, Breyer, and Gorsuch concur on the reasoning that recklessness doesn't apply. Thomas doesn't agree with their reasoning, but agrees with the result. And the other four, they don't agree with any of it. So, as Kavanaugh explains in his dissent, 4 justices form the plurality. Justice Thomas concurs in the judgment. He agrees with the plurality's result, but not its reasoning, and concludes that the phrase use of physical force alone excludes reckless offenses, such as reckless assault or reckless homicide. The court reached a different conclusion in interpreting a similarly worded statute in a different case, but Justice Thomas indicated that he will not follow the precedent in this case. Importantly, unlike the plurality, Justice Thomas does not rely on the phrase against the person of another. The reason I highlight this is just people get so focused on 5-4 majority or 6-3 majority. The Supreme Court more and more surprises people with the lineups. The Supreme Court more and more surprises people with the way it's deciding cases. And I just find it remarkable. There is one branch of government that the United States government can point to and say it functions. Now, here is a problem for the left right now. I point that out in large part because we need to note that the Supreme Court functions. And the left, because they don't control it, is trying to delegitimize it. And we're about to see them go into overdrive because of a case that's coming. Elena Kagan wrote the opinion in this case today. Again, it's a 4-1-4 case. Elena Kagan wrote the plurality. It wasn't a majority, it was a plurality decision. Now, this is important because of how the Supreme Court writes cases. If the Chief Justice is in the majority, the Chief Justice assigns who writes the majority opinion, himself or someone else. If the Chief Justice is in the minority, then the most senior justice decides, who's in the majority decides. So Breyer, in this case, would decide. And then those people, whoever is in the majority, they divide up the casework evenly among the justices. So every justice, each month at their cases, they spread out the opinions. So here's the problem for the left. The case that was decided today by Elena Kagan was argued in November. There were 2 other cases argued. The Obamacare case and the gay discrimination case against the Catholics in Philadelphia. That most likely means then that John Roberts is because of the way that cases are rendered and the flow of writing, that most likely means that John Roberts is going to write the opinion in the Obamacare case, and Sam Alito is going to write the case for the Philadelphia versus the Catholic one. That's a big deal because of the Catholic case. This is the case of Catholic Charities in Philadelphia. The Catholic charities around the nation do not do adoptions for single people or same-sex households because the Catholic faith says marriage is between a man and a woman. They believe that children should be adopted into a two-parent nuclear household, so they only focus on adoptions within two-parent heterosexual nuclear households. Now, that's not to say those kids can't get adopted. Catholic charities and other Christian charities do not have the sole access to these kids for adoption purposes. So if you are a gay couple or a single person, you can go to many other adoption agencies to adopt that same kid or any other kid. But the city of Philadelphia decided that because Catholic Charities upholds Catholic orthodoxy on biblical sexual ethic, they should be prohibited from participating in state adoptions. The Catholic Charities sued and said they have every right to participate in the public square and to help adopt kids without having to forego their religious convictions. And their argument is that if you curtail the number of agencies that are helping kids, you're putting gay rights above adopting kids. They have a legitimate constitutional right under the First Amendment to freely exercise their religion in all that they do, not just for an hour on Sunday or whenever Mass is. And the leftists said no, that if you want to participate in helping the government place kids into households, you must give up your Christian doctrine. If Sam Alito is writing the majority opinion in this case, it's really bad for gay rights activists. It's really bad for gay rights activists if Sam Alito is going to be the one to write it. He is arguably the most conservative person on the bench, even more so than Clarence Thomas. And, I got to, as an aside here, and I got to get into the racist birds and whatnot. But I got to say, I actually do have a number of gay friends. I know progressives are always appalled by that. I've got one friend of mine who actually lost a position on a volunteer committee because he was a friend of mine. And he's gay. And someone in the group, he was helping with a gay pride event in Washington, and someone saw that he and I were friends on his Facebook page and raised hell about it. I got a number of gay friends. I don't know a single one who is upset at the idea that a Christian charity may only adopt within Christian parameters so long as they can go to other adoption agencies. It would be one thing if the Christian agency was the only agency for adopting kids. I would have a problem with that as well, because I do think that there is something between sectarianism and secularism. If you had to go through a Christian adoption agency exclusively to adopt kids, and the Christian adoption agency said, we won't allow you or you or you or you or you, even though you're citizens of age to be able to adopt, I would have a problem with that. But that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with 100 agencies to adopt kids, and one of them says, we're not going to give up our Christian beliefs. You can go to 99 other agencies. If Alito's the one writing the case, I'm going to like the decision. I know, and most people will, but the left will go on a crusade to undermine and delegitimize the Supreme Court over it. That's what they do. Every organization has to be delegitimized. Now, speaking of delegitimacy, there's an organization out there that should be delegitimized and won't. The Journal of the American Psychoanalytic Association has just published a study likening whiteness to a malignant parasitic-like condition for which there is not yet a permanent cure. This is written by Donald Moss. The title is On Having Whiteness. Let me read for you the abstract. Whiteness is a condition one first acquires and then one has. A malignant parasitic-like condition to which white people have a particular susceptibility. The condition is foundational generating characteristic ways of being in one's body, in one's mind, and in one's world. Parasitic whiteness renders its hosts' appetites voracious, insatiable, and perverse. These deformed appetites particularly target non-white people. Once established, these appetites are nearly impossible to eliminate. Effective treatment consists of a combination of psychic and social historical interventions. Such interventions can reasonably aim only to reshape whitenesses' infiltrated appetites, to reduce their intensity, redistribute their aims, and occasionally turn those aims toward the work of reparation. When remembered and represented, the ravages wreaked by the chronic condition can function either as warning, never again, or as temptation, great again. Memorialization alone, therefore, is no guarantee against regression. There is not yet a permanent cure. This is in the Journal of the American Psychoanalytic Association. I want to read for you. I'm going to do something that some of you are not going to like. Jewishness is a condition one first acquires and then one has. A malignant, parasitic-like condition to which Jewish people have a particular susceptibility. The condition is foundational, generating characteristic ways of being in one's body, in one's mind, and in one's world. Parasitic Jewishness renders its host's appetites voracious, insatiable, and perverse. Those deformed appetites particularly target non-Jewish people. Once established, these appetites are nearly impossible to eliminate. Effective treatment consists of a combination of psychic and social historical interventions. Such interventions can reasonably be aimed only to reshape blacknesses' infiltrated appetites, to reduce the intensity, redistribute their aims, and occasionally turn those aims toward the work of reparation. When remembered and represented, the ravages wreaked by the chronic condition can function either as warning or temptation. Memorialization alone, therefore, is no guarantee against regression of blackness. There is not yet a permanent cure to blackness. Why is it you can say this about whiteness? And you know, some would say it about Jewishness. Better not say it about blackness. You actually better not. You shouldn't say it about any of them. Why is whiteness fair game? I've been telling you guys, this is a cultural current in the water that's going to hurt the Democrats. There actually are political implications here you need to understand. White people don't see themselves as a class. They don't see themselves as a racial group. When the left insists that they do, well, you know what happens with racial groups? One reason black voters tend to vote Democrat is because it's what black voters do. White voters overwhelmingly vote Republican, but they do so for reasons not related to race. You start telling them they're a race and they're bad and they're a parasite, they're going to start voting for a racial group, and they're overwhelmingly going to start rejecting the Democrats because of it. And the whole world is obsessed with it. The New York Times now has a story out today that the racist legacy many birds carry. The birding community faces a difficult debate about the names of species connected to enslavers, supremacists, and grave robbers. Jameson's firefinch is a finch with bright red plumage, a stout, sharp bill, suited for seed eating, named for James Jameson, who once purchased a young girl as a joke and drew sketches of the child being stabbed and dismembered. John James Audubon is to blame for this, the racist, and now we've got racist birds out there who are named for racist people and white supremacists, and now society is insisting that we get rid of the names of the birds. What did the birds ever do? They just got named by someone. Leave the bird alone. But we can't because they're a product of racism. The bird is a product of racism. Man, those KKK meetings of the birds must be intense when they try to burn the cross. How do they strike them? I guess they use the crows to steal the matches. And this is where we are as a society. People have lost their damn minds on this stuff.
He doesn't just have a radio show.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I'm sure you probably remember the situation with Morgan Wallen. Morgan Wallen is a country music singer. He shook, I'm reading now from USA Today, shook the country music world and the country when a recent video surfaced of him using a racist slur. In the video, he told a friend, take care of this N-word, referring to a friend he was with. He did not mean it derogatory. He meant it referencing it to a friend, and yet the world had to cancel Morgan Wallen. He had to apologize. He had to even tell fans not to defend him, and yet his popularity went up. He was taken off country music stations everywhere across the country. Cumulus, iHeart, and others said they wouldn't run his songs for a time, and yet on iTunes and elsewhere, his music skyrocketed. But he was lambasted, criticized, and condemned for using the N-word. A girl lost a scholarship to the University of Tennessee because when she was in ninth grade, in a 3-second Snapchat clip, she says, I can drive, and uses the N-word. And a boy in her high school holds on to the video for 3 years. And when she gets a scholarship to the University of Tennessee, drops it on social media and blasts the University of Tennessee and others for letting this girl advance. Her life is in ruins now. And the New York Times praised him and didn't do a lesson in forgiveness. No, praised him. She didn't mean it pejorative. She just used the N-word. And this kid comes out and says, all my life I've been put up with people like this. And waits for 4 years to ruin this girl's academic career. One use of the word for Morgan Wallen. One use of the word for this girl. And waited years. What about Hunter Biden? Hunter Biden has now been caught repeatedly and gratuitously and pejoratively using the N-word. Not meaning it lovingly to people. Not, and listen, I say that loosely. I suppose I should put air quotes in it, but you know what I mean. He wasn't actually, the Morgan Wallen and this girl were not actually using the word nastily. The president's son, who is 51 years old, flippantly addresses corporate counsel George Maziris, who is white, by the racial slur with the N-word. And he repeatedly uses it. He also, my goodness, saved a meme with a photo of his father hugging Barack Obama with a caption below the joke that uses the N-word. He used the N-word multiple times with his lawyer. His text messages reveal. He's doing the same thing that Morgan Wallen did. He's doing the same thing this girl did. Why is the media not outraged about Hunter Biden? Why isn't Hunter Biden being canceled? Why is the media protecting him? There is a real double standard here that is undeserved. If you're going to cancel random people on the internet for use of the word, Hunter Biden should be canceled. I mean, frankly, I don't think any of them should, but it's worth pointing out the hypocrisy and the double standard that's out there right now. The media going to bat, trying to protect the guy for doing this. Unreal. When we come back, the governor of the state of Georgia is going to join me by phone. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. Joining me by phone, the governor of the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp. How are you?
Hey, doing great, Eric. Thanks for having me on, and congratulations on the national syndication.
Thank you very much. I sure appreciate it. Let's talk about you in Georgia. And before I get into the policy and economics in Georgia, just want to ask you about the Republican convention, like you and Doug Ducey, among others, the governor of Arizona. You've done everything anyone could ask. Your states are doing economically well, but there seems to be just this very vocal, disgruntled group that is doing everything possible to, particularly in Georgia, try to run a primary against you for not violating your oath of office.
Well, I thought the convention went great. You know, Marty and all three of our daughters were down there. We worked hard Friday night, all day Saturday, all Saturday morning for about 3 hours before I spoke, an hour afterwards, and we had a big event Friday night and did the breakfast Saturday morning before the convention festivities, and just very well received. I mean, there was an orchestrated effort for the booze or whatever, but I wasn't censored. You know, that's all the Atlanta paper was writing about prior to the convention. That didn't happen, and, you know, it's pretty disappointing. The fake news media, you know, really, that's all they wrote about. They didn't bother to, you know, follow me for an hour or two when I was taking over 500 pictures, I would guess, and getting a lot of support and talking to a lot of people. And also, you know, people that had concerns I was talking to and having good conversations with them. They just reported, you know, a few minutes worth of booze during a, you know, fairly short speech. But look, I'm looking forward to running on my record. I've been a conservative governor. I've done the things that I promised people I would do, and that's what I'll be doing over the next year and a half.
Well, and you know, that you make a great point there, that it seems like in the coverage of this situation, there's almost a desire to create scandal as opposed to focusing on your policies or what's actually going on the ground, which some of the most vocal people who are against you and trying to primary you haven't been able to get even their county conventions to advance any sort of resolution against you. It looks like county by county, you've got this gubernatorial organization for reelection that's growing.
Yeah, well, we got, you know, grassroots leaders in all 159 counties already. We're building off of that, working on other endorsements, but our main goal is to get the endorsement of the people. But I think people have to realize there, you know, the mainstream media, they want to write the story that Republicans are divided. And, you know, I personally think conservatives and Republicans continue to consolidate against the Biden agenda that's being drugged to the left from AOC, Nancy, Bernie, and Chuck Schumer. And that's what we need to stay focused on, as well as the policies at home that did very well for us in the last election. When you think about our strong legislative majorities that we have, and just the many things that I've been able to do over the last 2 years working with the Georgia General Assembly. And the list is long, and that's what we got to remind people, and also say, you know, where do you want to go in the future? Do you want more of the number one state in the country for business? Do you want more of right now where have the lowest unemployment rate of the 10 most populated states? Our economic development pipeline is incredible right now. We've done the largest teacher pay raise in state history, over 50 health care bills. You know, we've got tons of logistics and infrastructure projects going on. And we pushed a conservative agenda not to defund the police, but back law enforcement, keep our families safe.
Well, I want to ask you about this agenda in particular, because when you and other governors, Republican governors, first said that you would not extend the unemployment benefit because it was disincentivizing people going back to work, the president and others criticized you. And now even the White House is saying it's your state's decision if you don't want to do that. There does seem to be some real correlation between that extended benefit and people not going back to work. And now that it's going away, people seem to, in Georgia at least, I mean, our unemployment number is pretty much where it was before the pandemic now.
Well, it's getting a lot closer. I mean, it's incredible how well we're doing considering what we've been through and considering how devastated certain industries were in our state. You know, some parts of tourism and the service industry, hotels, restaurants, you know, airline industry and other things. But we are doing great. But this is just the difference between Washington, D.C. and what's happening at the states that are led by, you know, business, you know, friendly conservative Republican governors like myself. We're using common sense to fight for lives and paychecks. And the decisions that we made to reopen the economy well over a year ago are now paying off for us with our revenues. We're going to be able to continue to fund workforce development programs to train a workforce. We're going to have a lot of people that are going to be shifting their professions coming out of the pandemic. Folks that may not ever go back to the restaurant industry or some other sector of the economy, but go into something different. And we've got to be prepared to do that. And our budget situation's, really good in that perspective. It's good that we haven't had to replace revenues with any federal stimulus money because of the great position financially the state's in. So we're going to be able to do really, historic investments and transformational change that will affect generations to come when you think about infrastructure, regardless of what they do in Congress on this issue, just with what we have now, what the General Assembly and I have put into the budget, also what we're doing on rural broadband and many other issues.
Well, let me ask you about the surplus, because it really is historic. I think I read it's the largest surplus we've ever had, and it comes on the heels of you, even before the pandemic, being very proactive in asking state agencies to slow down their spending and watch their nickels and dimes. And suddenly now we've got this massive surplus. Or should we expect the legislature in the coming year to I guess, go hog wild and now expand the budget even more, or will there be tax cuts? How are you looking at this in light of the surplus?
Well, a couple of things there. Number one, because of our really fiscal position that we're in, our conservative financial position, we sold $1.1 billion worth of bonds. It was some of the most sought after bonds from a state perspective that have ever been sold. Incredible demand because of what good standing we are here in the state with the rating agency, AAA bond ratings once again, especially in a pandemic. But we really got to let the budget process play out a few more months. I think it's going to be August or September before all the dates on moving tax filing deadlines and everything else baked in. You also have to remember we're comparing revenue numbers to this time last year, which was really when things were really bad. So that it's the gains we're seeing is a little bit off kilter. If you compared it to a normal year, it wouldn't be that. But we got to let it play out. But regardless, we're still in a very strong position. I think we're going to be able to do things that we should be doing as a state. I know my priority continues to be teacher pay raises and funding the things that we should be funding, like public safety, keep our families safe. I'm always for looking at tax cuts and other things. But this is also an opportunity for us not to grow government, to stay very efficient and effective and do more with less, but then fund our priorities like paying our teachers more or putting more money in the taxpayers' pocket or doing generational projects with broadband or transportation that will pay off, workforce development that will pay off for years to come without any long overhead that the state has to pay for from just building new government programs and things of that nature.
Let me ask you about crime. I realize crime is mostly a local government, county government issue, but the metro Atlanta area, as it goes, really so goes the economy of the whole Southeast. For the first time I can ever remember, I stayed up in Buckhead in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and the hotel valet, who knows I like to go out for a walk at night, told me it wasn't safe for me to go walk at night. I've been doing this for years staying at this hotel, and suddenly he's like, it's not safe for you to go. And crime just seems to suddenly be a major issue, and not just in Atlanta. In every major metropolitan area in the state, there seems to be an increase in homicides, burglaries, assaults, and local governments seem to be overwhelmed, and also criminals seem to be emboldened.
Look, I hear it every single day. I mean, we're living it too, because we have been drug into this because of the inaction of others, and I've got to do something about it. I know the General Assembly is upset about it. We've been working on this for months with the direction I gave the Colonel for the State Patrol, Chris Wright, to put whatever partnership he could together to go after street racing and violent criminals in Atlanta to try to help the Atlanta Police Department. Because people are fed up. I mean, when you can't walk down the sidewalk without getting shot, we have a trooper in the hospital right now that was involved in a shootout last night. A couple of them were. Thankfully, they weren't hit, and the bad guy, unfortunately, was. But, we got to go after these people. We got to send the message that we're not going to put up with this anymore. We need some people in Atlanta helping us with that. I commend Rodney Bryant on the restructuring and what his department has been doing. But everybody needs to step up and have their back. When your leader doesn't have your back in law enforcement, it doesn't mean we can't hold bad actors accountable, and we should. But those men and women that are putting their lives on the line every day to try to keep our community safe, we have to show them that we support them. If some of them get out of line and do something wrong, then they need to be, taken to task for that, prosecuted, whatever the situation may be, and dealt with. But it doesn't mean that we can't stand up for those that are trying to protect us every single day. And I've been doing that not only for state law enforcement, but for local law enforcement as well. And we'll continue to partner with anybody to help on the violent crime issue in Atlanta. It's out of control.
Hey, Governor, last thing for you here. You mentioned broadband infrastructure and other aspects out in the state. There seems to be demographically population divide and even in partisan thinking, a growing division between Atlanta and the rest of the state as more and more of the population centers in the metro Atlanta area. How do you get the legislators in the Atlanta area who dominate the legislature now in north of I-20 to really even care about the issues of people south of I-20 or up in the far corners of northern Georgia?
Well, I think it's two things. Number one, I think most legislators that are representing even their district know that it's good for all parts of our state to be healthy and to have a good economy. That's certainly good for a lot of businesses here in Atlanta and opportunities in Georgia for their kids. We are seeing people move out of cities now because of the pandemic and looking for a little more space. I think that's going to bode well for us in the future. But it also makes, who your governor is even more important, to have a governor for all the people in all the state and not one particular area of the state that really will think about our whole state's future and not, really pick one area over another. And I don't think anybody can say I haven't worked extremely hard for economic opportunity, prosperity, educational issues in the metro area. But I've also, done things like the rural strike team, focused on rural broadband, rural transportation initiatives, and there's many in the General Assembly, even in metro areas, that are very supportive of that. We'll continue to work on all those issues because it's good for our whole state.
Yeah, I think so. Governor, listen, it's great to have you stop by. It's good to hear your voice. Good luck out there on the campaign trail.
Same here, and good luck with the show, Eric. We're proud of you.
Thanks very much. Governor Brian Kemp joining me by phone out there on the campaign trail and in Atlanta. Still more than a year from the campaign, the primary about a year away, and the general election, of course, next November, and still a lot to do from a public policy perspective out there, particularly dealing with the crime issue. Now, for those of you who are listening now beyond the state of Georgia, I got to tell you, this is happening in every major metropolitan area of the country. The Atlanta situation is somewhat unique in that there's a major financial area of the city called Buckhead. 41% of the city's revenue comes from Buckhead. And major business leaders and citizens in that area now want to create their own city because their police force is largely gutted thanks to the mismanagement by the mayor of Atlanta. Several hundred police officer deficit, and a crime wave has been sparked across that area, including a random shooting over the weekend. I was on Fox News talking about it the other day on Fox and Friends. Dude randomly drives through a well-to-do neighborhood, just randomly shooting people out jogging. All because he can. Thankfully, they were able to catch him. Left one guy in the hospital and near critical condition. It's amazing. For the first time ever, you go into this part of the city where a lot of the tourists go. It's the big financial area of the city, and even the hotels are like, don't go out at night. Now, listen, if you do go to a hotel or you're going to bed at night and you want to get a good night's sleep with clean air, consider the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. It is a portable air purifier. In fact, I got to take a trip tonight, and I've already got it packed in my bag because you never know sometimes with hotel rooms if people have been in there and the hotel room has odors. This thing, it's filterless. You can hold it in the palm of your hand. You can, in a rental car or your car, you can plug it in with USB. You can plug it into the wall, and it generates ozone. It takes care of pollen. It takes care of odors. It doesn't mask them. That's the impressive thing about this. It doesn't mask them. It eliminates them. It eliminates black mold. It eliminates mildew. It's the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. To get it, you go to EdenPureDeals.com. Eden like the Garden of Eden. EdenPureDeals.com. And you click on my name. You'll see Erick Erickson on the front page. You'll go through. You'll get $10 off their lowest sale price. When you click through, put it in your cart. And when you check out, there's a discount code box, and you put Erick there, ERICK. Put my name in the discount bar on the checkout page. You will get $10 off the lowest sale price. You can get this great air purifier. It doesn't mask odors. It eliminates the odors. It does a great job. We have them in our house. I'm delighted to now have them as an advertiser as well. Eden Pure. EdenPureDeals.com is the website.
You can follow Erick around social
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, well, it's too late to even call in. Thanks to Brian Kemp for calling in. Ibram Kendi. You know, Ibram Kendi is now the intellectual light of critical theory out there. He's the man who believes that the only cure for racism is anti-racism, which he defines as reverse discrimination, that you must make it painful for white people so they understand how bad it was and the like. And he has said this.
I think I am sympathetic to teachers and educators everywhere who are committed to doing our jobs. And our job is to tell the truth. Our job is to tell the good and the bad. Our job is to tell the light and the darkness. And I think that's what students want. And I know I've had so many students who've come to my classrooms in colleges angry that they did not learn about systemic racism and even about slavery during their K through 12 years.
You know, you say to your podcast at one point, racism is harmful to white people. I think white people and some blacks are going, huh? What you talking about, Willis? Yeah. So I wonder if you could just briefly explain what you mean by that, because you said when racism wins, we all lose.
Well, let's just take a current example. We of course, have talked about the way in which voter suppression policies are disproportionately disenfranchising, Black, brown, and indigenous people. Mm-hmm. But it's also disenfranchising and making it harder for white people to vote. It's making it harder for all of us to vote, in these states.
Making it harder for all these people to vote, and that, really, this is where we are. This is what we're dealing with. That people don't talk about slavery enough. Really, we don't talk about it enough. This is kind of crazy talk to me. This is weird to me that we're at this point in the country where, are they not learning this stuff in school? I mean, they are. In fact, if anything, the left is obsessed with this now. But let's just say people aren't learning this stuff. If they're not learning it, whose fault is it? I would submit to you it's the public education institutions that are to blame. It's not like conservatives are in control of these institutions. It's not like conservatives are somehow in charge. I mean, it doesn't work that way. And if people aren't learning about this stuff, then it's on the left. It's not on the right, except they are. In fact, they're genuinely pretty obsessed with the topic. It's just, we're all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs these days. I'm flabbergasted by it all, but that's where we are. So now, what do? Well, don't give in to the crazy. It sounds easy, but it's actually kind of hard, because sometimes there's a lot of pressure there. Don't give in to the crazy and laugh at these people who come up with this